Hi, welcome to another mentoring moment. I'm Dr. Berin Gilfillan, and we are in a series called The Power Principles of Life. They all begin with the letter P. Today, I want to speak to you about the power of pillars. And pillars are very strategic. Book of Proverbs says these words. It says, "Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn out her 7 pillars." And wisdom builds with pillars. You've got to have pillars in your life. Now, in the Old Testament temple, there were 2 major pillars. One was called shaky. It's actually pronounced Yorkin, and it means he will establish. So there were these 2 major pillars that Solomon put into the temple. One he called this Yorkin, and it means he will establish. And then the second one was titled Boaz. And Boaz signifies in him is strength. So you take those together, and the names were a reminder that God would establish the temple and the worship of his name in strength. And the pillars establish the strength. So he will establish, and that in him is strength. So I want to just briefly talk about, the pillars that we need to establish. Really 2 major pillars, like in the temple. I see the pillars that we establish in our lives. The reason we're doing these power principles of life, these are pillars that we establish in our lives. And the first major pillar that everybody needs to establish is principles and core values. And we call them the power principles of life because each principle is a pillar. It builds, and you can build strength and you can establish things so long as you have those pillars. Our church, the Rock Church and World Outreach Center, it's here in San Bernardino. When they built the church, Pastors Jim and Deborah, they set up for the church 7 pillars. I'm just going to give you the pillars that they established as principles that would govern and guide the direction of the church. And I remember Ronald Reagan saying, if you've got principles in your life, then 90% of your decisions are already determined beforehand because you already have those established principles that guide you. And these are the 7 principles of the Rock. Number 1, the wells of salvation, that the Rock would be a place of salvation. Every single time you visit that church, you're going to be challenged with the message of salvation. And I think sometimes they win 200 or 300 or more souls a week to Christ through an altar call. And salvation is the core. They have wells of salvation at their altar. And then number 2, spiritual personal trainers. That's personal discipleship is a second principle. Not only do they get them saved, but now they have personal trainers to help disciple them. Number 3 is godly relationships. They actually itemize and they make this statement about godly relationship. Godly relationships are vital to the health of our church family. We're committed to provide multiple opportunities to connect people to Jesus Christ and to each other through small groups, events, and various activities. So that is just godly relationships. They work, and that's a pillar in the church. Number 4 is good works. They feed the poor. They visit the prisons. They go out into the community. They visit the elderly. They're just about doing good works. They feed, I think it's 500,000 to 1 million people a year, all their groceries. That's a key part, is good works. Then world missions is a number 5, and we feel so at home there as mission-minded people, and we just feel at home because World Missions is a part. It's not just called the Rock Church, but the Rock Church and World Outreach Center. It's a pillar. Leadership training, they have the Rock Bible College. It's called the TRBC, the Rock Bible College, and it's a tremendous place of training new leaders for the future. And finally, church planting, which they've established a number of churches out from the church into other communities. So these are the 7 pillars around which they build. So the first area that we have to establish in our lives is core values and principles around which these are pillars in our lives, and then around that we can build, that we can establish things. All right, now the second area is the area of relationships. This is people. People can become pillars, and people sometimes say that person's a pillar of the community. Pat Robertson recently passed away, and he was 92 or 93 years old, and he was a pillar in my life because I went to Regent University. I really learned so much. I would go to the chapels when he would lead them, and I would watch him on the 700 Club, and he just became such a pillar to me. Reinhard was a pillar to me. I just learned so much. Jack Hayford he was my pastor for a year. He was an incredible pillar in my life. And there are people that need to become pillars to us, and that we can, really, really grow around. Pastors Jim and Deborah Cobray, has been my closest friend, Pastor Jim, and Pastor Deborah came alongside my wife in the building of the women's curriculum that we have, and they were pillars to us. If we had not had them, we could never have established some of the works that we've done, and they've been pillars in terms of friendship, in terms of examples, and these are some of the areas. I'd say number one is example. A pillar has got to be a person who sets an example for you. Number two, a person of faith. I learned so much about faith from Reinhard, always stepping on the water. There's stability. They need to have strength, and they need to have a legacy that these people carry. I just want to close with saying that also the enemy has pillars. And the story of Samson is really one about Samson. His whole life fought the Philistines and tried to take out the Philistines. But in the very end of his life, he was placed, and they had made him blind. They had taken his eyesight, and he stood between two pillars. The pillars of the temple, which was the representation of the enemy's temple, that what the enemy's built. He's built an infrastructure for evil in many, many respects. And Samson, he put his hands against those temples. He prayed to God against the pillars of that temple, and he prayed to God and asked God one more time, give me strength. And he smashed the pillars of that temple. And the Bible says that he killed more in his death than he did in his whole life. So we need to figure out what the pillars of the enemy are, and we need to take down those pillars. And if we can take down the pillars, we can then destroy the plans and the purposes of the enemy. So with that, establish pillars, build with the 7 pillars, build with whatever pillars and principles, and build with the people that God's given your life. Pillars are very powerful. So until next time, God bless you.